You're a woman living 12,000 years ago. Your last blood didn't come. You feel tired in a way that doesn't make sense. Your breasts ache. And somewhere deep in your gut, you already know. But here's the terrifying part. There's no test. There's no doctor. There's no way to be sure for months. And whether you're pregnant or not might be the single most important piece of information in your entire life. Deciding what you eat, what work you do, whether you go on the next hunt, whether you survive the next famine. And you have almost no way to find out for certain until your body makes the decision for you. This is the story of how humans spent tens of thousands of years trying to answer one of the most basic questions a body can ask. Am I creating a new life right now? And the answer they came up with is stranger, smarter, and more surprising than you'd expect. Let's start with the obvious problem. Pregnancy today is confirmed in about 2 minutes with a plastic stick and a cup of urine. For nearly the entire span of human existence, that technology simply did not exist. So women and the people around them had to become expert detectives, reading a body for clues, piecing together a mystery with nothing but observation and generations of accumulated knowledge. And the first clue, the one every culture eventually landed on, was the missing period. This sounds obvious now, but think about what it actually required. Someone had to notice a pattern. Someone had to realize that the absence of something, a monthly event most people wouldn't even track on paper, correlated with a baby appearing 9 months later. That's not a small leap. That's the kind of pattern recognition that takes generations of careful observation passed from mother to daughter, midwife to apprentice, long before anyone had a word for statistics. But here's where it gets complicated. In ancient populations, missed periods weren't a reliable signal on their own. Malnutrition, breastfeeding, hard physical labor, and generally poor health all interrupted menstrual cycles constantly. A missed period might mean pregnancy. It might also mean you hadn't eaten enough that month. So ancient people needed more evidence. And that's where things start getting genuinely inventive. One of the oldest confirmed pregnancy tests in human history comes from ancient Egypt, documented in a medical papyrus roughly 3,500 years old. The method involved a woman urinating onto separate batches of wheat and barley seeds over several days. If the barley sprouted, the prediction was a boy. If the wheat sprouted, a girl. If neither sprouted, no pregnancy. Now here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. In the 1960s, researchers actually tested this ancient method in a lab, and the seeds did respond to something in the urine. Pregnant women's urine caused germination at meaningfully higher rates than non-pregnant urine, likely due to elevated hormone levels affecting the seeds. The gender prediction part was basically a coin flip, no better than chance. But the core pregnancy detection? It worked more often than it should have by random luck alone. Ancient Egyptians didn't understand hormones. They didn't know what estrogen was. But through pure trial and error, repeated across countless women over countless generations, they stumbled onto something that had a real biological basis. That's not superstition. That's applied science without the theory behind it. Other cultures developed their own versions of the same idea. Some soaked wool or cloth in a woman's urine and watched how it reacted over time. Others observed the color and clarity of urine itself, watching for changes that, again, may correlate loosely with actual hormonal shifts happening in early pregnancy. None of this was random guessing. It was centuries of women comparing notes, testing methods, and keeping what worked. But urine tests weren't the primary tool most ancient societies relied on. The real expertise lived in something far more hands-on: physical examination. Midwives. And in most ancient cultures, pregnancy knowledge belonged almost entirely to women, developed detailed systems for reading the body itself. They'd feel the abdomen for firmness and shape. They'd note changes in the breasts, the skin, even the way a woman walked and carried her weight. The Roman physician Cyrannus of Ephesus, writing around 2,000 years ago, compiled one of the most detailed gynecological texts of the ancient world. He described checking the eyes for a certain dullness, watching for changes in appetite and taste, and noting a specific heaviness in the lower body. Some of what he wrote holds up surprisingly well against what we now understand about early pregnancy symptoms. Some of it was pure folklore, but the sheer level of detail tells you something important. This was not guesswork. This was a discipline, refined by observation across thousands of births. And then there's the signal. Every ancient culture eventually treated as undeniable proof. Quickening. That's the moment a pregnant woman first feels the baby move inside her, usually somewhere between 4 and 5 months in. Before ultrasounds, before heartbeat monitors, quickening was often the first moment anyone could say with total certainty, yes, there is a living being in there. It mattered so much that in many ancient and even medieval legal systems, quickening was treated as the actual beginning of recognized personhood. Before that moment, a pregnancy was suspected. After that moment, it was confirmed, sometimes with religious, legal, and social consequences attached. Think about that gap. For 4 or 5 months, a woman might strongly suspect she was pregnant and still be living with genuine uncertainty, planning her life, her work, her diet around a maybe. Now here's something that connects all the way back to evolutionary biology, and it's honestly one of the more fascinating threads in this whole story. Morning sickness. Roughly 70% of pregnant women experience nausea in the first trimester, and researchers have proposed that this isn't a design flaw. It might be a protective mechanism. Some scientists argue that nausea and food aversion during early pregnancy evolved specifically to steer women away from foods that carried a higher risk of toxins or pathogens, precisely during the window when a developing embryo is most vulnerable. In other words, feeling sick might have doubled as one of the body's earliest internal signals that something had changed, long before a woman consciously pieced together the missing period, the tender breasts, and the exhaustion into a single conclusion. Your body may have been trying to tell you before your mind caught up. Beyond the physical signs, ancient cultures layered in something else entirely: ritual and belief. Fertility figurines carved tens of thousands of years ago, small stone and ivory sculptures of pregnant female bodies, some of the oldest human art ever discovered, suggest that pregnancy wasn't just a medical event to our ancestors. It was sacred, mysterious, worth carving into stone and keeping close. Many cultures developed elaborate belief systems around conception itself, tracking lunar cycles, dietary taboos, and ritual practices meant to encourage or confirm pregnancy. Some of it aligns loosely with biology. A lot of it was pure symbolism, an attempt to bring order and meaning to a process that, frankly, must have felt like it was happening inside a locked room nobody could see into. And that uncertainty had real consequences. Because ancient people couldn't confirm pregnancy early or reliably, decisions that today we'd base on a 2-minute test were instead based on probability, intuition, and community knowledge. Whether a woman could go on a dangerous hunt, whether she should reduce physical labor, whether certain foods should be avoided, all of that hinged on best guesses stacked on top of each other. And when the guess was wrong, the consequences could be severe. Miscarriage rates in ancient populations were extraordinarily high, and maternal mortality was one of the leading causes of death for women throughout most of human history. The stakes of getting this right weren't abstract. They were often the difference between life and death, for both the mother and the child. Which brings us to something worth sitting with for a second. Every single method we've talked about, the seed tests, the physical exams, the careful tracking of missed cycles, the reading of nausea and fatigue and quickening, all of it exists because women, working entirely without modern science, refused to accept uncertainty as the final answer. They observed, they tested, they compared results across other women, across other pregnancies, across generations. They built, piece by piece, an entire body of knowledge, with no textbooks, no laboratories, and no formal scientific method. Just careful attention passed down, by word of mouth from one woman to the next, for tens of thousands of years. Some of what they figured out was wrong. Some of what they figured out, like those Egyptian seeds sprouting in response to pregnancy hormones, was accidentally, remarkably right. So the next time someone takes a pregnancy test, waits 2 minutes, and gets an answer in the form of a single clear line, it's worth remembering what that convenience replaced. Thousands of years of women reading their own bodies, like the most important text they'd ever study, piecing together clues from missing blood, sprouting seeds, and the first flutter of movement, because for most of human history, that flutter was the closest thing to certainty anyone had.